everyone, it's Juan and welcome back to another video. Today I'm here to talk about reading. So in the next few minutes I'm going to try to convince you to read more slowly. But first I'm going to tell you a little story. So a couple of years ago I decided to start my own bookish channel here on YouTube. You see, I started reading in a big and serious way when I went to college. So by the time I discovered that some people talked about the books they had read here on YouTube, I had about, well, over 20 years of serious reading experience under my belt. I consumed YouTube videos for years before I stumbled upon videos where ordinary people, i.e. not celebrities or professional book reviewers, talked about books. I still remember binge watching some of those videos and I found them fascinating. You see, reading has always been a solitary activity for me. I do have friends who read, of course, but most people I know in real life are not readers, or if they are, they don't necessarily read the kind of books I read. So I thought it was great that people discussed all kinds of books here on YouTube. I thought then, and continue to think now, that some people on this platform are so smart and so engaging when they talk about reading and books. It took me about 2 years of watching some booktubers regularly, fairly regularly, before I decided to make videos about books myself. The videos I watched were mostly book reviews, and I honestly didn't know what book hauls or TBRs were before I got involved in making videos and watched more YouTube videos about books. So my initial idea was to review books, and that's what I did for the first few weeks or months until I started feeling this silly pressure to talk about more and more books every time. I realized that a lot of people, probably most people who talk about books on YouTube, discuss several books in each video. And I also realized that whenever I did that, I got more views. The problem was that I would have to increase my reading pace considerably or start talking about books I haven't read. And just to be clear, I don't mean lying about what books I had read, but rather do the kind of content that would not require me to read so many books, you know, TBRs and book hauls. I did a mix of increasing the number of books I read and creating that kind of content for a while until I realized that there was no point in that for me. So for the last year or so, I have been reviewing books individually every Saturday, and I just love what I do. And I am satisfied by the videos I make. People seem to like them as well, and that's all I ever wanted. Okay, you may be wondering why I just told you all this. Well, there is a point to this, of course. By switching back to focusing mostly on reviewing individual books, I was able to go back to reading more slowly. I now take my time with each book I read, and I think I am the better for it. So today I want to share with you the lessons I have learned about reading fiction and why I think you will read more if you slow down your pace. This video is for everyone who wants to watch, of course, but I have in mind people who want to be better read, more educated, people who want to read more classics, understand them better, etc. So I'm going to give people like that some advice based on my personal experience, and I hope it will be helpful. I think that there is way too much emphasis on the number of books you need to read, and because there are so many great books available to read, there is the real temptation to read as much as possible. But beware of that, because trying to read as much as you can will only lead you to frustration. And the last thing I think someone who loves reading would want is for their passion to become the source of frustration, right? The first thing I want to say about that is that I think that counting the number of books we read is one of the dumbest things we could do. Let me explain what I mean by this. Okay, so this year I have a list of books I want to read, and I talk about this in another video about reading big books, so I will not repeat myself here. I checked my list right before shooting this video, and I have 71 books on it. Most of them are novels, but there are also some plays. Why did I create the list? I compiled the list to give me focus, to give my reading focus. I had some criteria when I made the list. For example, I included some classics I did not want another year to go by without reading them. I also included some novels in French so I could practice my language skills. Now, The least important thing in that list, or about that list, is the number of books. I did not have a number in mind when I added the books to the list. I added the books I wanted to read, and the total number just happened to be 71. It could have been 10 or 200 for all I know. Now, am I worried about the possibility of not reading all 71 books on that list? Not one little bit. In the same way that I most probably will read books that are not on the list, I might also not get to some of the books actually on it. And that is okay. I am not concerned about the number of books I read. I just do not want to forget what I want to read, and I just did not want to forget that I wanted to read the books on my list. But if I cannot finish all of them this year, so be it. Despite its many faults, I use Goodreads to track my reading. In case you don't know, Goodreads is a social media network with a website and an app that allows you to keep track of what you and your friends are reading, among other things. So I look back on previous years on Goodreads, and I always find books on there that I have read, but that I have either no memory of having read, or what is worse, I think, I don't remember anything about the book's content. Luckily, this is something that only happens with a minority of books, but ideally I would not want it to happen with anything I read. Sure, I don't expect to remember every single detail about every single book I read. That would be an insane expectation, but I want to be able to remember at least something about the plot, something about the characters and the themes of all the fiction I read. Something that works for me is doing my reviews on this channel. I put so much work into them that it feels like studying every single book I review on here. And frankly, this is one of the reasons I continue to review books, and I just don't plan to give that up. I am not suggesting that you review all the books you read, but I would strongly advise you to take notes as you read, and particularly immediately after you have finished the book. Give yourself some time to write about every book you read, and you will get a lot more out of it. I can guarantee you that. I did that, of course, when I was a student. I studied English, so that was kind of expected. But I never did it for the books I read solely for pleasure until I started my channel. And I did miss out. Having this channel just gives me that extra motivation I need to stay on with a book for a little bit longer after I finish it and work on it. I don't think I would do that so gladly if I didn't know I had to review the books I read on here. Taking time to reflect on what you read and take notes will slow down your reading pace, but I am sure you will also find it a lot more rewarding than rushing through a book so you can read the next one and then the next one and the next one. I think any reader who focuses on the number of books they read is going about it very wrongly. And not just because I think they will get less out of what they read by doing it like that, but also because counting the number of books would only work if all the books you read have the same font and the same number of pages, and that is highly unlikely, right? Let me give you an example, and I will use well-known classics so you know what I'm talking about. Reading Kafka's The Metamorphosis would take a lot less time than reading Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky, for the simple fact that Crime and Punishment is a lot longer. But that is also wrong, because it assumes that we always read the same number of pages or words at the same speed. And that is not always the case, or at least should not be the case. A shorter book could take you longer because it could be more difficult than a longer book. How can it be more difficult? For example, because of the language, the structure, the themes, etc. Let me give you an example of this. Okay, so I recently read The Trial, also by Kafka, which is not a huge book. I read an ebook version, so I cannot show it to you, but take my word for it, it is not long. And yet I had to stop reading every so often because I found it suffocating. Now, a longer book that was lighter and compelling would probably take me a lot less time to finish than The Trial. So what is then the point in counting the number of books you read? Or perhaps not so much counting, but making the number of books a person reads into something of any importance at all. A lot of books are incredibly easy to read. You know, I once had a work colleague who only read popular fiction, hugely popular fiction, and she could read one of those novels in just one evening, in one sitting. If she did that only a few times a week, she could read hundreds of books every year. But you could have someone who spends the best part of a year or maybe more than a year reading one book, something like In Search of Lost Time by Marcel Proust, or The Golden Notebook by Doris Lessing, or Ulysses by James Joyce, or, I don't know, The Second Sex by Simone de Beauvoir. You can call me a snob if you like, because I know I'm not one, but I think there is more value in spending a long time reading and really digging into any of those books I have just mentioned, or many others, than reading silly little novels just for plot and titillation. And I am not in any way diminishing the pleasure someone could feel reading those kinds of books. For one thing, many people read a mixture of high, low, and middle-brow books. Also, I think those distinctions are very often, not always, but very often meaningless. What I am saying, or trying to say, is that if we are talking about literature, not just classics necessarily, but literature, the number of books a person reads is pretty much irrelevant. What matters is how much they enjoy reading, and I believe that reading fiction should primarily be about pleasure and joy, and how much they get out of it. I believe that slow reading brings a lot more pleasure than rushing through books, and this brings me back directly to why I would advocate for reading slowly. Reading slowly means reading more. I read slowly, and I am still able to review one book per week on here. That does not mean I read a new book every week. I'm just well organized when it comes to scheduling my book review videos. On average, I read, or rather I review 4 books per month, and that is not a lot to read if you think about it. If you take a look at BookTube, you will see a lot of people who read 3 or 4 books every week. My reading pace will never allow me to do that, but that's okay. I don't aspire to do that anymore. If you want to make progress, if you want to read at a steady pace, I think the best piece of advice I could give you is to read every day, even if you can only manage to read a few minutes per day. You will be surprised how much you will be able to read. I think most people could probably afford to read 1 hour every day, maybe not in one sitting, but definitely 10 minutes here, 5 minutes there. Try it and let me know. Paying closer attention to what you read, relishing the language, exploring the structure and the themes, digging into the context for the books you read, all of that will enhance your reading experience. It will be more fun. At least that's what happens to me. So, I guess I'm talking from experience here. Your experience may be different. Whether you agree with me or not, I hope you can feel like you can share your experience in the comment section down below. Please do that if you like. I would love to hear from you. So, have I convinced you? Perhaps you are already a slow reader who savors everything you read. Whatever the case may be, let me know. I think this is all I had to say about slow reading today, so I am going to sign off now. But I'm not signing off before I say thank you for watching and goodbye. I hope to see you again very soon for another video. Bye.